you can see a code up there if you want to shine your phone on that. I'm going to use Menti to interactively. So we're going to be jumping between Menti questions that you'll answer, and we'll talk about that. And then we'll be jumping into a couple prepared slides that I've got as well. But if you can't see it, you can go to menti.com, and then you can use the code 75143656. And I could probably.
I don't even think it asked us for that. I got right in.
Oh, if you,
if you use the QR code, it pops.
Yeah, the QR takes you directly there. Yeah, and so the first question is, oh, by the way, I'm going to say who I am. I'm Jim. I've been around, I like to say, since, dirt was invented. And I've written operating systems for Burroughs, which is a mainframe. Has anybody ever heard of Burroughs? Okay, good. There's some old people in the room. I've also I was in aerospace for 11 years. So composites, I love composites. We built the CAD system and machine control to build composite panels for aircraft. So B-2 bomber was the first aircraft I ever built. And since then, the EFA fighter, F-18 EF series, Harrier, and a lot of aircraft I don't know about, and you don't either. And it was very exciting, and it used every bit of physics. I have a degree in physics that I ever had, and more. And it was very exciting. So after that, I got into then technology. And what's cool about technology is I've been able to travel the world and meet with a lot of you people, like you people, that have really changed the way I think about architecture, changed the way I think about engineering, especially. My last 4 years, I've been on this gamut. Architects exist to empower engineers. I mean, that's kind of a different way of thinking what architecture is, but that's my mantra right now. And I moved here 4 years ago to Minneapolis from Seattle, where I worked at one of the cloud vendors and one of the telecoms. And that was exciting work, but not nearly as exciting as my grandkids that live here. So that's why I moved here. And I love it. I love it in Minneapolis. We are never moving again.
Excellent.
Done. We're not moving again. I will stop before I move. So let's look at the first question, and let's see if I can get to it. Okay, so we've got some people answering, and turn that off. So word in the center is exciting. I see height. Shiny, yeah. I totally agree. Let's talk about shiny for just a second. I told Steve I was going to do this. There's a great philosopher, and I've read, I think, just about every one of his works. And he's written a piece that really addresses what I would say the hype around AI. Have you heard of this philosopher? His name is Dr. Seuss. And the star-bellied sneetches. Star-bellied sneetches are sneetches that have stars, and the non-star-bellied sneetches don't. So this guy comes in with a machine, and he can put stars on non-star-bellied sneetches. Well, then the guys with stars feel like we're not different anymore. So what do? They get a machine that takes the stars off. And back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Nobody knows who anybody is. And then the guy that made the machine is rich. And I think that's my optimistically cautious warning around AI and generative AI. Everybody's got something to sell you. And I have a litmus test when I ask people. If I ask Grant, are you an expert on AI? He'll say, no, I'm not. I don't know much about AI. I think I want to. I think I do things, but it's too big for me. It's too much out there. Okay. He's an expert on AI, if you can answer it that way. If somebody says they're an expert on AI, they're a salesperson. So it's kind of scary, I suppose. So that's a good thing about hype. when you wrote down what you wrote down in here, I don't see anything, okay, I see volatile here, fun ahead. I'm not seeing any of the, who ate you? I'm not seeing anything that's too fearful about it. Has anybody got any kind of fear they're harvesting secretly about AI? Yeah, I do too. We're probably 15 years away from that AI, but I had a conversation with my parents, so I probably agree with Arun and Charlie think on that one. Do you guys want to chime in?
Yeah.
I think that there's clearly a lot of buzz. One of the things we're starting to come up against is that people think that they're going to have a conversation with their enterprise systems.
Oh.
That we get this over and over again, and they're not going to have that they're not going to have a ChatGPT conversation with the 20 years of enterprise data they have squirreled away at 1,000 locations in their enterprise, unless they solve the data warehousing problem that they didn't solve 20 years ago.
That's so spot on. The hype is going to drive them. Well, I want to do it with my data, separate from the rest of the world, and it's kind of it's not going to happen. That's a harsh reality. Arun, you kind of in the mix of things.
Yeah, so there's a lot of like interest. However, the risk factors are slowing people down, right? So they're being very, very cautious, but not at the extreme where it's going to take over the world, because we live in a pragmatic world. But it's the hallucination, intellectual property, security, data privacy. Those kind of issues are really coming up, especially what Charlie was talking about. Is that when you pointed to enterprise data, people are finding it's a harder problem than what they imagine, right? And it's not only because of its creativity, that these are all creative machines, but also because of the data. People are realizing that data makes the difference.
Yeah, data. It always gets down to data. Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
You know, I just saw something this week. They rebranded the I use the word volatile because there is a bit of fear I have in the near term. And it's not that robots are going to take over. Of course they are. And thank you to our future overlords. But the thing I point to is the UX in safe and unsafe, in data leakage and not data leakage is too razor thin. The difference between Copilot logged into your enterprise data and Copilot completely all of your data is getting scanned, learned from, and brought into the public internet is a little green badge that you have to notice that you were logged in before you used it. That is incredibly scary. There's nothing worse than having your associates feel safe and do activities when they're not. That is when really, really bad things happen.
So I'm going to play off on that because I talked a little bit about that at University of Minnesota earlier last month. You're spot on. So building a Copilot or a GPT is well, we're going to get to that. When we get to that next thing, we'll talk about it. We'll just go right to that next Minty question that I've got, because you're spot on, and it's again, it's that Sneetches kind of a thing. Oh, here we are. The next one, before using Gen AI in my business, I got 3 questions before we start talking. So this is the next one. Before using Gen AI in my business, I need to first clearly define the outcomes, evaluate how others are using it, look at the other players. And then one is, I'm just going to play and learn on my own and figure out how to do it. So there are no wrong or right answers until we go down to the bar afterwards, and then we'll talk about it. We'll talk about all the right and wrong answers, kind of a thing. So this is an interesting group. This is not answering how I've seen it answered in other situations. We're actually the opposite. But it is a little bit. It's a little bit interesting. So all the material that I'll be sharing tonight came from somebody either in the CAF or in the ISO C2D program, because these guys are in it, doing it every day. And it's just amazing the amount of collective knowledge that we have that we can share with each other. Grant, you were talking a little bit about, people who are doing it. One of the guys that will be the first material I share, he wrote not the generative AI, but the traditional AI, what I'm going to say, material for Walmart and CVS over the last 5 years. And it's amazing, but it gets 85% correct. Its correlation is only 85%. It's not that high. And it gets into what Charlie was saying. If your data sucks, your output's going to be harder to get more accurate. So, sorry, can I say spots?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
There are words we couldn't use in Michigan, and out in Seattle, so, all right.
No rules.
Yeah, all right, so nobody on the evaluate how others are doing it. I'm kind of glad to hear that. We'll learn why later, but I'm kind of glad to hear that. So that'll come back to haunt us. But this is an interesting diverseness that I never would have expected. Completely am blown away with that one. That's kind of.
Does this actually, you're surprised by the?
Yeah. So I've been spending a lot of time in Seattle recently, working with a large retailer. So Target's number 10 in the retailer. This is number 3 in retail, and they are 000. They have no generative AI, no AI in place. They don't want it. They don't allow their employees to use it. They are completely against it. Until December. What happened in December? Does anybody know David Nelson? He's local. He and I went out there and we built a prototype of generative AI just for the C-suite. Nobody else saw it, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. We're trying to do, Charlie said can't be done.
You said that.
That's hard.
And he's so right, but it's what they want. Add my data to it. Does anybody know how data gets added to these models? Has anybody played with it with ChatGPT? How do I add my data to the models?
There's 2 different ways you could do it. If you have a RAG system set up like a vector database, put it in there. That's probably the easiest, fastest, cheapest way to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can fine tune your models to take a small amount of the data that you have, mix that into a chat model that already exists, like Mixtral, and that would be like the next step up beyond, as far as cost goes, to bring that data into your model. And then the third and most expensive option is to completely roll your own, bring in all your data to a huge model.
Has Adam met Charlie yet? Because I didn't know about vector databases until in January when Charlie told me about them, and I'm like, how did I not know about these?
Because Dan McCreary told me about them in December.
There's some honesty.
They've only been around for a little bit of kind of, they were a research project up until 6 months ago.
That kind of makes the old guy feel like he's still relevant, but don't worry about it. I don't know everything, and I don't claim to. But that is a good point. I would expect that I'm gonna wait and see. I need to know what I'm gonna do with it before I'll jump into it, especially in the Midwest, where more of the laggards on curves than we are in the beginning of the hike. So that is encouraging, actually. So one more question, and then we'll get into more a little bit directed conversation. Who's played with it? Right? So take a look at your phone. It's hard to read. If you've never tried it before, you're in the right place. This is where you want to be. If you've built your own Copilot before, GPT, great. We want to hear what you're doing. I built 3 GPTs and I built 3 Copilots. To your point, there are 2 checkboxes actually. There's only one that guards you from your data going out into the open internet. But it's more dangerous than what you said there. Because I couldn't get, I did the GPT first, and so I used Krispy Kreme donuts for my talk on January 11th, because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings if I didn't use a Minneapolis company. And who doesn't like Krispy Kreme donuts, right? So I did a GPT. 80% of my time was loading in their SEC 10K statement and their website information to Aaron's point, right? I was feeding it in and I built my own GPT. I didn't make it public, right? I don't know Krispy Kreme, they probably sue me, so. The other one I did was a co-pilot, and I spent 80% of my time figuring out how to get it to work after I loaded the data in it, because the security was locked down. So that's the good thing, I co-piloted. Security's locked down, but I could not get it to work, and I needed it for the talk, and I'm like frantically, so I went to Bard. I said, how do I get my co-pilot to work? I get the security error and gave it the error. Oh, you gotta go into your AI settings or your IA settings and turn this checkbox on. Okay, that's the checkbox you're talking about, which opens up your data, everybody. Whoa. There were all the jokes about S3 storage that was out there that people didn't lock down, you know. Oh, that's nothing compared to the tsunami that's about to hit us. It's kind of exciting. So cool. I like, you know, I don't surf, but that'd be kind of fun. So we've got use generative AI via browser. Cool. Question is, who uses more than one? Okay, great. I want to see almost every hand. You almost have to use, you can't almost, you have to use more than one right now. It's a necessity. Does anybody?
I take issue with number 3. If you've talked to Jim Welch, he's used AI. So
Yeah.
he's
You know, okay, so how many of you in the 10 that coded today, you guys, who got burned when they changed the call in OpenAI? It doesn't work anymore for to generate the response. It's like I published all my code and none of it works now. That's kind of, when you're on the bleeding edge of technology, you know, this group's gonna feel the pain. That's all I can say. And that's okay. It's a good pain to have. What are you saying, karate? No pain, no gain, right? So, cool. All right. So let me go to here. Oops. So I want to talk about knowledge types. And this is an article that was just published a week ago by Walton Lee. He's the guy who's retired from Microsoft, but he's probably their top architect for anything AI in the industry with the customers. He's done all the work. I'm going to share the deck and I'll have links to all of these articles as well. What Walton did that impressed me is he said, we're going to use AI, but we're also going to use, you've heard of knowledge systems and knowledge management, right? Probably Arun and Charlie have written articles about it. And so in the enterprise, we're all about knowledge management. He wanted to create something called knowledge engineering, where it's engineered knowledge. AI is going to engineer the results of the knowledge. And so he writes in his article, you've got to create types of knowledge in this human brain inspired approach. I like the way he categorized it. By the way, you also know someone is really intelligent and knowing what they're doing when they're the most humble person on the planet, and that's Walton, and the other people, the material I'll be sharing. So on short-term knowledge, you're really looking to identify emerging trends and react, if you will. That's what your short-term knowledge is at the enterprise level, perhaps, is a way of saying it. I don't know. Charlie, you can correct me if I'm saying something wrong. I always learn every time we talk. The other one is immediate, intermediate knowledge, and that's where your strategy comes from. Your intermediate knowledge is how you're taking where we are today, where we're going, and what's the strategy to get there, right? So if you don't have an AI strategy today, we'll talk about that a little bit later, because you might want to think about it. The long term is what I would say in the first mentee slide, there's some fear about. And the long term is your institutional wisdom or intellectual property over extended periods. This is what makes your company unique, or what you think your company is unique about. It's your, you know, it's the knowledge that you don't want anybody else to get access to. And that's where everybody's afraid but that's what everybody wants access to internally only, because that's what they want to mine, because there's more of that data than there is of the other data types that are out there. So if we're looking at a maturity model or an assessment, if you will, what I would say, these knowledge types are kind of along the lines of where you might want to focus some initiatives, some, what I would say, pilot programs or experiments or anything like that. So, question back to the group, not a mentee question, no. Is anybody working in any of these three spots right now? With, it can just be data analytics, but just, is it kind of where your focus is? You know, where are you seeing your organization focusing on? This is your data warehouse, right? This is your OLTP, right? And this is social media for all practical purposes. So, I know you're probably addressing all of them at times, but sometimes you've got to pick, where am I going to start my pilot? And the one that we designed for this retailer in the West is really kind of these two. What we did is we built a system to make them operate their stores better. And one of the things that Walson says about knowledge, it comes from your data, right? It comes from your company awareness of what's going on around it. And the last one, it comes from your people. So when he's building these models for healthcare, he's interviewing nurses because they have more patient knowledge often than doctors. Doctors have diagnosis knowledge and they interact with the patient for a shorter period of time. The nurses know the history of the patient. His goal is to mimic what the nurses know, not what the doctors know. And mimic what the nurses know to accelerate a doctor having that information readily available to them so they can make decisions. And so this is interesting, but he really focused on intermediate and long-term knowledge to get that. And a lot of long-term knowledge is in people's heads, so you got to get that out. And it's on paper and on photographs, on x-rays. There's a lot that has to be done in that space as well. So any thoughts in the room on this? And by the way, anything I say up here is for debate because I'm a neophyte when it comes to all this technology as well, just like most people. It's a lot of things. Yeah.
The areas of interest that I've been working on is regulatory, because the regulations are public, so they're critical to the enterprise. And so I've been building a RAG system for an EHS manager based on OSHA and EPA regulations, which are impenetrable if you just sit down and read them. So to have a conversation about compliance is really important, and then the RAG system can cite the specific statute that is governing. So
Yeah.
It's a productivity improvement.
So good. Your name? Bob. Bob's got it down right. Bob, can I impose on you? It's in the paper, but can you tell us what a RAG system is?
Retrieval augmented generation.
Yes.
So basically, and that's why I use the word link in the first one, is that I think the idea that LLMs are the solution or the endpoint is the wrong way to think about it. It makes previously very challenging programming problems trivial, and then you use the results of the LLM to do the real work, is the pattern that I see eventually emerging. Whether RAG is the right pattern or not, I don't know. But it's certainly not now.
That's gaining popularity. Absolutely. So something Bob said that I want to always take a moment, let it sink in, is you're looking at the outputs of the LLM as an augmentation to make you make better decisions about what to do. It's not replacing what you're going to do, it's giving you better data and information and insights to do it. So that's great. If Bob is hiring, we all want to send a resume to Bob.
I'm not working at the moment.
Yeah, but he's spot on, and that is the people that know what they're doing with open AI and generative AI in general. That's a differentiating factor, what you said. They know that it's not going to automate decisions, it's going to provide better information to make decisions. Yes.
I've been working on projects internally where I work where we're really focusing on standardizing the data. So you talked about the importance of the data sets.
Yes.
Because your LLMs can always evolve over time. You know, the newest hotness right now is going to be replaced a month from now. It's going to keep happening, but your data sets, depending on how your machine learning pipelines are, depending on how everything is, you plug in what is new, what you are tweaking to try, how well does this compare to what we've done previously. And it means though that our data sets, like if we want to take our own internal knowledge bases or documentation, hey, we have sitemaps that aren't standardized and they don't list where our documentation actually is on websites maybe that we want to harvest. And just standardizing on that means our pipelines are now cleaner, more improved, and can go, hey, I noticed in the sitemap there's one new file instead of I'm going to ingest thousands of pages over and over again because I'm not aware of what's new. So those are some of the things we've been looking at for the long-term benefit of seeing internal gains.
So are you creating like a GPT internally to do this?
Yeah, teams are internally creating GPT, but I'm just assisting more so with the data standardization.
Right. Clean data is everything, but the reality is we will never get all clean data. And so some of the things that are, some of the articles referenced is talking about the gaps in your data and using AI actually to try to fill in the gaps in your data to give you a better source of data to build your models from. Yeah, Charlie.
Yeah, this always comes up. People say, oh, our data is so bad, it will never work. I'm actually not that concerned about bad quality data. It's really not the problem. The problem is not knowing what data you have, where it is, not securing the access rights. You know, it's like, I know the data is there, but they're telling me that I can't have it. No way, no how. You'd be surprised how much of a problem that is. The LLMs actually can handle fuzzier information that isn't absolutely precisely correct. You know, and sure, will there be issues that stem from data that is not precisely right? Yes. But I don't see that as a big roadblock. And everybody, you know, talking in meetings like meetups like this, people are like, oh, it'll never work for us because our data is crap.
Your data is always going to be crap. Get used to it.
You know, it's not useful to be binary about data quality.
Yeah.
It's at 1%. You know, is it
Exactly.
99%? Is it 90? If it's at 99%, you can do a lot of work with that.
Even less than 99%.
That doesn't mean you can that.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree. What you described is a solid MDM and data governance. And so if you don't have, I'll go right to you. If you don't have a good data management process in place, then no matter how good or bad your data is, it's not going to be interpreted and understood appropriately. And that's, you get to the heart of the matter. Of all the AI work I've done in the past year, 100% of it gets back down to that, the data management aspect of things. Getting a data catalog, getting the metadata about the data to describe the data so that people are talking on the same page. And it's like a broken record, right? It's like it keeps coming back. And I can tell you, the executives I speak with keep saying, you just keep wanting to sell us this data management package. And it's like, no, I'll give it to you for free. You have to have it. It's a base requirement. You know, you can't do it without it. So great. Is it G?
Yeah. So you're describing first a job that's not really been fully defined yet.
Yeah.
A new role in this whole field of AI is the data. You know, like you just said, the foundation, the cataloging. And it was interesting because I was with a startup for 2 years with using AI and massive data ingestion. And that was what you guys just described was like me sitting in a client meeting.
Yeah.
And the data catalogs, just even between that company and the different areas, it's the context. It's like, okay, I got this, but how is it collected? What does it mean?
Right.
So what you're saying is the biggest hurdle that it's very hard to get a company past because it's hard work. And so there's like a whole consulting opportunity with doing that hard work.
Right.
So
master data management is
yeah, how
a
do you
big
quantify
role.
that role? Okay.
I have only worked at one company that got it, figured it out. It was in Washington, it was a financial institution, $40 billion. And they were, I worked with the actuaries. And basically, I had an actuary come to my desk because I was the CDO. And he said, I got a beef with you. I said, get in line. He goes, we just lost $5 million. And because the data was 30 minutes old that we needed. And I'm like, I don't know a single system that we have is up to 30 minutes accurate. So I'm not surprised, you know. So help me walk me through this. And it had to do, and again, if you're in a financial organization, what's the drug that most of your business people are hooked on? Oh, it's worse.
Yes.
It's worse.
Other people's money.
Yeah, other people's what?
Other people's money. Opium.
Yeah, opium, but it's also Excel. It's the technology.
Yeah.
And so our problem is everybody's taking the data out, shoving it in an Excel spreadsheet, and making decisions. And how do you fix that? So that is, there's no elixir to that. You have to really get top down, really you have to get buy-in. But if you get top down buy-in, the bottom up execution fails when there's nobody to describe the data. Either because
Yes.
they don't live anymore, they've retired and, you know, gone away, you know, in the organization where nobody knows. They can't look at a table and tell you what that data means. I look at a screen, I look at an AS400 screen, how do I know what that looks like? So you gotta have teams that work together on it. So yes, question over here.
Well, so I have three concerns. And some of the things we're talking about, I just wanted to offer that the two things that make it fail are not having that executive sponsorship, because it takes a lot of work across the entire organization, a lot of time, a lot of conversations, and reading. And the other thing that I've seen make it fail is having the sort of binary concept of good or bad data.
Yeah, it gets down to that.
You can't have that. You have
All
to-
data is gray.
You have to figure out what works in your organization around inequality, around, you know, alerting, around benchmarking, around,
Mhm.
you know.
Transparency and telemetry can do wonders for understanding where data is a little grayer than other places, but a lot of organizations are siloed and won't do that. So we really are getting to what I call the people management issue. It's kind of a thing. So, all right, let me get to the next thing. We're kind of building up on something here. Maturity levels. Thank you, Justin. Back. He put these together. I'm not married to any maturity level definition, but this is as good as any I've ever seen. So we're going with Justin with together. And I like it. So maturity levels, you're ad hoc, which means I'm smart when I need to be clever, right? But I had engineers in Washington that were clever, and it got us into so much trouble. So that's the first level. Repeatable means I can make the same mistake over and over. I'm sorry, I can make the same decision over and over and over. Defined is where most people land. That's kind of the top level where most people land, which means you've got a data management system in place that's somewhat working where you can go to. I don't care if it's a Confluence wiki, it doesn't matter. I got somewhere I can go to get the resemblance of what's working and why. Optimized would be where you have it totally, what was your name here? Yeah, you talked about, who was the one that talked about, or was it back here? You were talking about mining and looking for new documents? Was that?
Oh, yeah, that was me.
That's optimized. Using generative AI can get you to an optimized level, kind of a thing. So I'm sure you all seen different levels of optimization. Microsoft has 5 levels. That's my background when I worked at Microsoft. For IO optimization, we had 5. But I think 4 is easier to work with, so I'm sticking with what Justin had. And so what I did is, I'm an architect. You gotta get 1 diagram or 2 out of this discussion. So what I did is I kind of put it together this way. I decided you can't treat your organizational maturity as an index number. It's not an NPS score, net promoter score. It's not, a net promoter score, which means my customers love me, right? That's not what this is. When it comes to anything with data, a 2-axis is going to work a little bit better. And I've used this in the past. I just like the stuff that people have put out. So Walson and Justin, I took your 2 brains, put them together, and I got this. And you can use this. The idea is, and I'm going to kind of draw on this because I don't know what the real answer is. I'm going to just throw out speculation, okay? But for short-term knowledge, I might be able to land somewhere here. I might not have to go all the way to optimize for short-term. Why? Well, because it's temporal. It's reactionary, it's temporal, it comes, it goes. For immediate knowledge, maybe I'm kind of here, and for long-term knowledge, maybe I want to get optimized for long-term. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. What do you guys think? By the way, you can fill in your own criteria what that means, what optimized means.
Let's be consultants and say it depends, right? What business are you in? Yeah, actually, if you are an actuary, right? And long-term knowledge is helping you understand risk, absolutely, right? What if it's a new emerging threat? Well, you might need to be optimized in the shorter term, right? So if you're looking at trying to model risks on how much data you're going to lose to AI, and be there. So I think if I was to zoom out and kind of blur my vision, I like where you drew the circles.
So, and it's just the seed, but it could be with generative AI. It could be I might be able to leapfrog because I'm taking not just my data, but I'm taking data of others like me. By the way, what's the one common thing every enterprise, every corporation has with every other corporation? What's that one thing that they have? Anybody know? Grant knows. They think they're unique. Yeah. The irony is, why is this generative AI hitting home so well? Because it's based on data from everybody else that's just like you, even though you think you're unique. It's just kind of the reality. So any thoughts on this, using a kind of a 2-dimensional way of putting a maturity model together? What are you going to do once you know what your maturity is? We'll get to that.
So Jim,
a little bit. Yeah,
I have a counter, maybe devil's advocate.
go for it. I hear you're really good at that, by the way.
Yeah. So, I love studying nature and ecosystems, right? So you can look at the events where optimized for a certain time. I mean, this could be taken consistency too, right? Disruptive. When you're really optimized, when disruptive technology comes in, the real optimization is your accuracy. Because you're so optimized in a certain way that when disruption comes, it's something like totally different. And most optimized systems fail because they just can't, they don't know how to react, right? And I think that is the risk of generative AI right now.
I agree. And thank you for quoting Clayton Christensen, one of my absolute favorite authors. Clayton Christensen talks about disruptive technologies, all the things that we take for granted. Somebody at one time said that'll never work. I literally, the Winchester drive is one of the examples in the book. I'm writing operating systems at Burroughs. We've got big disk packs, 10 per drive. And these 5 megabyte drives come out for CPM computers. This is before the IBM PC. And I'm like, isn't that cool? And all my colleagues laughed at me. They said, yeah, 5 megabytes. Woo! How long is the latency on that? Well, it's faster than a floppy drive. Not much. It's okay. And then it replaced, we all know, it replaced the disk packs. But they're gone now too. What replaced them? SSD drives. Isn't technology cool? And I like what you're saying. I think I'm gonna interpret your statement in that if you're missing one of these, you're at risk. And I'm gonna say, if you're all here, can anybody explain to me what the risk is if I'm all optimized?
Lost all your money.
I lost all my money to get there. But there's a real risk. Thank you for bringing that up, Arun. What's the risk if I'm all optimized? Go ahead.
To lock into a system that could be disrupted.
Right, and it's Chris? Chaz got it. You're totally locked into what you do and you will not change. And I think, and you'll take your systems as they are and you'll go over the cliff while everybody else is learning to fly. And that's the danger. So yeah, I don't think you want to be, it's not like a quadrant. It's not like you want to be all over here. You've got to kind of be all over the board and know when to use what approach and how deep to go in that approach kind of thing.
One of the, just on the short inside, there's, he's gonna give a talk, so I'm not gonna steal your thunder, sorry. But we both were introduced at the APC with our former boss about a concept called general purpose technology. He basically said, hey, these GPTs, which is the pre-training transformer technology, looks like a general purpose technology such as electricity, right? And I think his insight was pretty cool in the sense that there's certain type of technologies, the World Economic Forum also talks about it, which we have to be very careful about, right? It changes everything, replaces everything. And I think in that case, I think as architects, if you can figure out like, oh, this one looks and feels like it, test it, and then say, by the way, this is different than incremental technology. So incremental can absorb, right? You can absorb. But
Wow.
it's really disruptive.
Yeah.
We gotta be different, right? We have to behave like what they say, right? So maybe I won't use that term, but a tribe, right? Which was known to be very out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna loop back to that point.
Okay.
Just so you know, but you're spot on in so many ways. And the reason is, and it's all the emerging technologies and things like that. What's an architect's crystal ball, right? Exactly, Greg got it, it's this room, learning from each other. That's an architect's crystal ball. We can't do it in isolation. We can't do it in isolation with our own organization. We have to be connected to others. What's really, really, really cool, I learned this when my son was very young, he had some health difficulties. And one of his doctors said, everything we talk about, I'm gonna go take back to a consortium of other doctors, 6 of us, we'll all discuss it. And then I'll let you know what we're going to do. And I said, good, are they all in the same hospital system? He goes, oh no. They all work at different hospitals. That's why I talk to them. That's kind of what this group is about. We need to hear, otherwise we're gonna get locked into the way we think and the way our cultures think within our organizations. That can be dangerous. So here's a fun one. Let's go back to the Menti. See if I can get there. My talent pool is, where does your talent reside? I expect this to be different than what I thought it would be based on our previous answers. So talk to me about your talent, how your talent is harvested, how your talent is managed, how your talent is encouraged to grow.
Are you talking about the personal talent or the organizational?
Organizational talent. And personal, can be both, but I'm looking at more organizational. I'm going somewhere with this. Wow, this is an interesting, okay, this is why it's great to do these talks. I'm gonna put all of the Menti data in the last slide so that you all have it. Justin, it's a burden on you, you're gonna find a way for them to download the deck at some point. If only you knew a technology consultancy that maybe could figure that out for you. Okay, curious, ready to learn. I'm going to challenge that one. Are they allowed to learn on corporate time on corporate equipment?
That's the key.
No. Yeah,
So this is where this conversation starts to listen a little bit, because even if you take out AI from the equation, like 70% of CEOs don't revisit their objectives from the previous year. Like 80% agree that their greatest weakness is talent, but 5% have a learning and development program.
so basically you're
So
saying the
Gen AI
CTOs have a learning disability.
It seems like
Oh, this is being recorded, I guess I won't get that
the
job.
least of their problems.
So I struck, and so now you know my mantra. When I said that my goal is architects need to enable engineers to do what you paid them to do. Think, do smart engineering. And if we basically take them and put them, here's your laptop, here's your container, here's the 2 languages you can use, the 1 database you can use. And we've got a pipeline, and if you need anything more, it takes about 40 days to get you there. Okay, that's gonna be very disruptive to their momentum of thinking. And one of the things I was successful in doing, I got about 300 engineers to this level. You take away those blockages. You get, you know how you have exceptions for security because you can't fix it because there's nobody that knows how. And so you get a security exception. I got engineering exceptions to where my engineers were exempt from the constraints of the organization. And the first thing I did was I had a team, had to build a refund calculator. They had 6 weeks, and they came to me and said, hey, we're gonna do it this way with containers. And I said, well, how about doing it serverless in the cloud? And they were like, well, A, we've never used the cloud. B, what's serverless? And C, can I use Java? I know you'd use something like Node.js or TypeScript. And they're like, So I said, could you try it? They go, yeah, we'll try it. Because you build up a rapport over time. And then I said, could you do it? Well, they asked me, what cloud? All 3. Okay, so think about it. You're an engineer, you've never programmed in the cloud, you've never used the language, and your architect just told you to do it in all 3 clouds. Okay? You know what happened? They are up and running in 1 day on one of the clouds, and a half day on another cloud, and a half day on the other cloud. They were done in 2 weeks, and they had 6 weeks to get it out, and it could run on any of the 3 clouds. They go, why do you want us to do it on all 3 clouds? I said, because one of them is going to perform better than the others. We don't know which one till you try. Okay? That is not a mentality that we have yet in engineering. And because nobody knew what my role was, when you're a distinguished architect, everybody's like, what level is that? I don't know. Do I have to listen to this guy? I don't know, maybe. So leverage it, right? Leverage people that you can get in collaboration with you to do the right thing. But that is going to kill an enterprise. And we'll see a little bit more later because there's more to come. So that's an interesting spread. Has anybody lost their job when the internet came out? Who got a job when the internet came out? Me too. How about losing your job when the cloud came out? I don't think, but if that's a real fear, it doesn't, just because they don't need to have it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist, which means it does exist. The perception is there. We have to address it. I think playing with the technologies, like the guys that I got to do the cloud stuff, they've never done it before. And it's like, well, if we knew it was this easy we would have been doing this years ago. Well, they wouldn't because they weren't allowed to, but that's another discussion. Okay, so let's see.
Like year 2000, moving into the year 2000, all the fear that was everywhere. And
That's it. So,
the same thing as that.
just Gary, do you remember the commercial for Nike shoes before 2000, right? The gas pumps aren't going to work, the banks aren't going to work. I refused to do Y2K work because it just was ridiculous to me. But the reality is everybody was afraid. Nike had a commercial. It's January 1st, 2000. And all the animals are out of the zoo running around. All the stores are broken down, right? All the gas pumps are not working and cars are lined up. And these two runners just pass each other and do the runner's weight, keep on running. To Nike, it didn't matter. Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so let's get into this piece. Now, this is a busy, you're not going to read it all, but let me just describe it. There's a paper that that you can reference on this. It's in it'll be in the notes, but the key here, your talent maturity. So I struggled for the last 6 to 7 years on talent maturity. And I overcame it in Washington in 2 organizations, and some organizations locally are doing a really good job. Thomson Reuters is one of my colleagues that are the CTO of Thomson Reuters. They nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. So what happens, and I struggled with this, I couldn't find out why we don't trust our engineers. I worked in an organization at one time that said engineers are like preschoolers running around with knives. And I said, my experience with engineers is they're more like surgeons running around with scalpels. So that's the dichotomy it worked. So the question got answered. I was talking to Gil Severson. He's a Dell CTO. And he and I were talking, and I go, I'm struggling with why we don't let engineers do what we pay them to do. And he goes, I'll tell you why. I don't know why we don't let them do anything. Help me with this, Gil. He goes, we don't trust them. It used to be, I knew what they were going to do. They would deliver it. We knew the time. And if anything changed in between, we'd go through change management, and I knew what would change and then what the extension would be. And I could get my arms around that. He goes, now you're talking about experiment-driven development and trying 5 different ways to do it. And that scares me because I can't get a commitment out of my engineers that they're going to deliver it. And I said, but you know they're going to deliver it in half the time if they do what you're used to doing. He goes, yeah, I know. He goes, I know I'm the problem. He goes, but I can't get over that mentality. So I kind of put this together. Again, it's a 2-axis concept of every organization has talent that can do miracles, right? And so it's a 2-axis system. I can't do it with one number, but I need to know my readiness, right? Which means I can consume internal, I can adopt industry standards, I can contribute to the industry. It's you, okay? You're here, you're contributing to the industry, and I can guide the industry. And that's people like these guys in the front row, they're guiding the industry. So this is a level of maturity. Then the next thing is, where's your performance? Okay, I don't code, I have others that code for me. My engineers don't code, I do it all offshore. Okay, I gotta govern that a little bit better. Teams deliver, teams originate, and teams guide others. So when I put this team to do the cloud work that they've never done the cloud before, guess what I did? I paired them with another team that has done cloud work before. They could answer the questions. Why? Because that team could guide others. They were right up here. They could guide others, and that's why the team didn't have too much of a pushback to do something they've never done before, because they knew they were elbow to elbow with others that have done it before and knew how to guide them. And by the way, when you're guiding others, you're not guiding them if you tell them, well, you're doing it wrong, you need to do it this way. Okay, that's not guiding them. You're guiding them if you say, oh, I remember, it works different than the way you remember, and that really sucks because I like the way it worked before, but you got to change the way you work now. And I totally understand. Unfortunately, you got to learn the new way, but it totally sucks, and I get that. I had to get over that too. That's training others. You're doing it from a perspective of, I've been there and I know what you have to do to grow. I'm not going to guide you by telling you what you're doing wrong. So that's one thing. Investing in your teams to do that. And the whole idea then, as you get into it, as your readiness increases, as your performance increases, you get different levels of governance. So if you're at the learning phase, yep, I'm gonna look at everything you're doing in architecture. Sorry, you're learning. I'm gonna learn from you too, by the way. As you move up the chain to leading, you don't go to an advisory board anymore. It's a pass-through. You are an autonomous engineering entity that's going to do the right thing, and when you screw up, we know you're gonna fix it. So we don't need you to go through the advisory board. There's just a paper trail that shows you made a decision and it moves forward. And so that's kind of how that works. You can actually learn to trust engineers. And
Tim, did you develop this?
yeah,
That's outstanding.
well, thank you.
He's a distinguished engineer.
Yeah, I don't totally suck at everything.
That's amazing.
So what you'll find in practice, when you do this in practice, you'll find it's a normalized curve, all right? You're gonna have rock stars, okay? You're also gonna have people in the learning phase, and it's not always learning. You have people that don't want to change. You ever run into that? You know, you got, I can't say Bob, because Bob's really contributing well tonight. I think Joe, is there Joe here? You've got a Joe that just doesn't wanna change. I had DBAs in Washington that didn't want to change. They didn't want to learn cloud, nothing. That's okay. There's always going to be some legacy system that they are necessary to keep running and just keep them out of the way of these guys. Most of your talent is going to be engaging and perfecting. That's where your time and energy needs to be spent. It's moving them to the right. Some will fall back to the left, but most will try to move to the right. This will never be bigger than the others. You know, it'll get bigger than the learning maybe, but it won't get bigger than these two. Because not everybody can be a rock star all the time. So I just kind of throw that out there, and you'll get the slides, and there's a whole paper on this. So you can kind of look at it. So let me get
Tim's
to,
been known to send people papers that want them.
yes.
They'll share it. He always does.
Yeah. This is an eyesore for you if you're looking at the screen, but give me use cases that you might leverage on this one. I'm just curious. This is all great data that I'm collecting here tonight. What's interesting is I play in all of these spaces. I can assure you, not anyone is way better than the others. They're all fun. What is it? We're going to see in the next slide, we're going to see something from Oliver Cronk. And in his paper, he ends it by saying, architecture is fun again. Okay? Guess what? All of these things are fun. So who's writing code? Just raise your hand if you're writing code. Okay. What's your experience like?
It can be really good.
Yeah. It can't write the code for you, it can guide you.
It'll get close, yeah. And it'll sound really confident when it's wrong.
Exactly. That's hallucinations and biases that you have to worry about. Do you run with one model or do you go through multiple models?
Depends on what I'm trying to do.
Okay, because I have a colleague that's a CD as well. He reads legacy code for what it is and explains it. It takes another model and says, rewrite this code, COBOL, to Node.js serverless, and make sure it follows with this explanation. And then he takes another model and says, how did that do? What would you change? This explanation, this code rewrite, what would you change? That's 3 models now. Then he writes the test case with the 4th model. Why does he use so many models? Some models give up. If you found that out, some models like, can't do it. Just, nope, not gonna happen. And so you have to rotate them around. He's built a pipeline and automation to do this. And what he's doing is he's not lifting and shifting code to the cloud. He's rewriting applications from on-premises to cloud native in a different language on a different platform. And he's doing 100,000 lines of code a day, his teams. He's got 50,000. And he physically change the way they work. Put mute on maybe.
Voice might be you.
It sounds like that all the time.
No, I don't think it's him. I think it's something else in the room now.
Yeah, hold on, I gotta get this back running again. I hit it, oh, not the start. Okay, so let me go back to our, okay, that's gonna change. Let's go to the next one. Oh, I'm not ready for that one yet. Hold on. We're not gonna go there yet. I do have another slide. Oliver Cronk wrote this article a month ago about proposed architecture for generative AI. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And the reason I love it is because everything we've talked about is incorporated into this architecture. So let's tackle some of the tough things that are going on. One is demand management, right? Those of you that are using the tools, either through the browser or the APIs, if you run into where it basically says we're too busy right now. Yeah, I run into that more than I care to, but stuff's expanding, it's still growing, right? Another one is input filtering and model IO engineering. This is really important. The guys at Thomson Reuters, there's an article about them. I'm not sharing anything private to them. It's published. They published an article. There's a podcast, actually, it's a podcast that they're on. And Justin Wright and Matt Deemish have found certain models cost more than other models. Certain parts of your architecture need the more costly models. Other parts of your architecture can work well with the less costly models. You don't need as accurate an answer. Close enough is good enough at some points. So that's really kind of cool. And what Oliver says right here about model zoo, I don't know where he came up with that term, but I love it. I'm gonna get a t-shirt that says I have a model zoo at home. Basically, you can't use one model. You have to use pretty much all the models. And the reason is not all the models will react the same way to the same inputs, same prompts, and they always one will appear smarter than the others, and it's never the same one. It's not always Bard is better than the others, and it's not always GPT is better than the others. Sometimes Bing is pretty good, you know, Copilot's pretty good, and then it totally sucks in the next question. So you have to really understand what's going on. Telemetry, observability, and monitoring. If you're not doing it now, now's a good time to start. But if you're not doing it now, that will be your Achilles heel. You know, you really need to know what's going on in the systems. And regulatory is all over the map on this. The only thing we know at this point is it's generated by generative AI. You can't copyright it. So you know that's kind of the European. So we have to think these things through. But then in the mock-up that I did, the checking output, I didn't have this architecture diagram. I got to add it back to an article I wrote now or reference it. Checking your output. This is where you can, what I'm going to say, diminish, if you will, concerns on corporate security. Checking output and input filtering. Those are the two places where you can put checks and balances. Am I sharing something I shouldn't be sharing to this tool? So I put a model together on this back, I don't know, May last year. And most of the people that I got feedback from was, yeah, it's really nice, we'll never use it, right? But I had one company that did use it, and they built it, and they presented it at CES this year. And it was like, cool, right? So they were asking me, what do you check your prompts with? What do you check with? Gen AI. We're gonna ask a mistake. You shouldn't, but it's the only way I knew you could check a prompt. Does this prompt potentially contain any corporate information? So you have to do it in a more secure way. Yeah, it's the double circle. You're chasing your tail.
You said something really important just then. You said if it's been generated by AI, it can't be copyrighted. Is that pervasively? I mean, that's a huge statement. Is that true?
Right now, the European law that got passed has one of the statements in it, and that's also being held up here in the United States. So anything you publish that's generated by AI is open knowledge.
Oh, publish. Because a lot of folks are using it in R&D.
If you're using it internally, don't share it externally, you're good.
Even the US copyright law has the same thing. So there was a guy who wanted a competition for, you reveal that the image, everybody knows that, right? So he won the competition, then he said, oh, there was a lot of controversy, he tried to copyright this image. What the court said that you can't.
Right?
What you can do is copyright the prompt.
Ooh, now that I did not know.
Okay, so here's a place for code. If the same thing applies for code, if the prompt generates code, and if your employee takes the prompt and regenerates that code, you can't sue them.
Interesting.
Wow.
That's a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's exciting.
I'm glad we're drinking after this.
Yes, you got it, Grant. So, yeah, so let's get the last mentee question. Yep.
One of the things I noticed here, and this is something that I've been working at, is that if you notice the input, processor, output, that's a known pattern. Does anybody recognize that? Which pattern is that? Right. Oh, 60s, but there's a
Ingest, curate, consume.
guy called Gregor Hoffman.
Yes.
Has written a book called Enterprise Integration Plans. Right? So that is a pipes and filter. You can go extend anywhere. The bottom point where you're observing is actually wiretap. What's interesting is that when you look at it from an architecture standpoint, when you replace the technology, it doesn't matter. You already have a body of knowledge. And what surprises me is that people don't recognize that. In
Those
fact,
one
you
of
can
the
go and
patterns.
say you
Yeah, no, you're spot on, and I wouldn't have called the patterns out directly, but I do, everything in architecture is a pattern, more or less. And this is definitely, I'm glad you're saying that, I really respect Gregor Hoppe, he's really awesome. I would say, and that's what we did in our engineering situation to get them outside of the strong arm of governance. If they were implementing anything using an accepted pattern in the organization, they did not have to go to a physical review board. Pass through was one of the things that they're using an existing pattern. There would be spot checks, but that would be just reason we do spot checks is to learn what they're doing to create new patterns from the work because we harvested patterns from the engineers. So that's a great call out. And that's what this is all about. We should be using each other's architectures, patterns, and things because it's vetted. Okay, last question. How long before you engage, or more or less your organization would engage, or former organization engage? So good. Everybody's
a biased audience here.
Yes. Stack the deck here. I love it. There's a reason I'm asking this question. And it gets to the last point that I want to share, because when I was working in this financial organization in Bellevue, Washington, one of the best gifts I ever received was when the CEO brought in somebody from Gartner or Forrester, I can't remember which, and they talked only to the business executives and all the way down to senior director, right? No IT people at all. And this gal from that organization said something that was just profound. If you're not doing this IT stuff today, you are 10 years behind your competition. And then she said, if you wait a month, you're going to be another year behind your competition. And if you wait 2 months, you'll be 2 years behind your competition because the spin up was so long. And I thought, I got permission to listen in on that. I was so excited to hear that. The idea was to get the executive suite on the business side to realize the necessity to invest in the technology, because this was a small financial organization sitting on a lot of money. And they had, what's a margin of a typical finance company? Anybody know? What do you think, Matt? Yeah, we were at 0.4% margin. That $5 million mistake was hurtful, kind of a thing. So I'm glad nobody's waiting 2 years, right? So when do you start? Personal computer. I shared this at the January 11th talk that I did at University of Minnesota called Code Freeze. 50 million users in about 15 years. By the way, that's a generative AI answer, not mine. But I did follow the links and try to get some research to back it up, but generative AI made me a little bit lazy on that, sorry. I was around, so I can kind of say, yeah. All right, so the next one is the internet. 5 years to get to 50 million users. That's like, woo, right? Cloud. Okay, I was part of that rollout. It took way too long.
You were part of all those roles.
I know I was. 50 million in 10 years, okay? So let's take a look. Gen AI is at 100 million users in 2 months. And the GPT marketplace in OpenAI has over 3 million GPTs, okay? If you're not doing it today, if your organization is not doing it today, you're going to start falling behind about a year every month that you wait. You are generally going to, because your talent needs to get up to speed on this, and doing it at home is not the right thing to ask them to do. I had employees, I hate to say it, that were buying their own cloud memberships to learn how to do cloud because they weren't allowed to do it at work. And that's a travesty in my mind. So anyway, that's kind of the thing to think about. If you're not in it, you should be. Well, you all are. Congratulations. Go ahead, Matt.
Can I object to that?
Sure.
So the reason I object to that is because GPT, Gen AI in general is a disruptive technology. One of the reasons it's a disruptive technology is the general common person on the street can use it. One of the key attributes of technology. One of the- That's why they got the so that there's a lot of way more powerful, way more interesting technology, and because only deep academics and elite engineers is so hard. We play with cognitive architectures in that brain AI space, and it was really hard to do. But that's why it hit that. So the longer you wait, that doesn't have the same curve. You could wait 2, 3, 4 months. In fact, you should, because then when you show them the bugs they worked out, you'll be able to work with a more stable product. So that's the one thing I look at, like, we both were talking about here. Like,
Yeah, so I'm gonna take a karate move and swing it back at you in a minute, but Randy, you wanna say something?
I'll do something kind of in the middle. I think that one of the things I found really interesting was a really brilliant mind who's been in the AI space for decades. I had a chance to run into him again at the Mac just recently, and I caught up with him, and I'm like, so what multi-million-dollar thing are you doing? Because you've been in this space forever. He's like, actually, business kind of fell over, and I'm doing, I'm consulting. And I'm like, but you're one of the great minds of this space. And this is one of the fascinating things that he kind of shared with me is, well, yeah, I helped to figure out how vector databases work and how the telemetry of language works, but that's all the commodity stuff now that's sort of packaged, and it's who can actually leverage that technology in the right way. So where I kind of balance the two things you're both saying is, while the technology is going to continue to advance, being an expert in vector or being an expert in today's LLMs might not matter. What does matter is applying that technology to business problems, driving outcomes, and creating a flywheel.
Yeah.
And that's where the fear comes for the jobs. Right?
Thank you. Yeah, so we're all gonna beat up on Matt now. No. Matt is spot on, and I'm gonna rephrase what he said, because 100% agree with him, and as an and, it's not an or. So 100% agree. Generative AI is accessible to the common person, and they can do magic, or appear to do magic with it. There is no magic. At the talk I did in code freeze, I actually took Alexa and asked it what's a half of 2/3, 0.333, what's a half of 2 bananas. Here are banana recipes. Okay, we thought Alexa was smart, right? So I did it with Copilot, what's a half of 2/3, 1/3, not 0.333. What's a half of 2 bananas? 1 banana. And here's how you calculate it, and blah, blah, blah. So it's getting better, but it's not sentient. And it's not artificial general intelligence, AGI. We're not there yet. When Matt gets done building us a real quantum computer, we're going to be there. We're just weeks away, right? That's
It makes me nervous when he does that.
Yes. Yeah. So my first neural network, my first neural network was in aerospace, laying the fiber. We would preheat it with lasers. So we used a neural network to preheat the resin so that it would lay evenly, because any deviation in the laying means the plane crashes, and that's really bad. So that was my first exposure to a neural network. And then I was in consulting, we built a product called Next Opinion, which we did on a tablet before tablets were a thing. And it was for an emergency room situation when a patient can't tell you everything that's going on. It would ask you questions, and it used a Bayesian engine, Bayesian search, to narrow down what it could be for the location that you're in. And the idea was to save lives, because the person that funded it lost his high school son, and the diagnosis was drug overdose, and he knew his son never took drugs, and he knew his son never took drugs. So Dr. Joel Robertson, our country's foremost brain surgeon, did a second autopsy and found out it was something different. And so the guy said, I want to stop this. And so I worked with Dr. Joel Robertson's team, and we built the software. This is what I'm going to say, really exciting work, but you're nowadays using GPUs, you're using a lot of linear algebra, a lot of third-degree differential equations, you're using a lot of mathematical models, but it's going to transform the way we work. So the and on the Matt's thing is, I love that space of even traditional AI, the work that I've done in traditional AI. I was so fortunate to do a talk in 2019 in Kazakhstan, where I got to talk about it, and I put Bayes' rule up, and it was like a TED talk. And after me was a NASA scientist, and he grabs me on stage and goes, dude, you put Bayes' rule up there, you're my hero. And I thought, where are you going next? I'm gonna go launch a rocket in Russia now. Okay. So that's a different level of intelligence, if you will, and commitment to doing AI that is not going to be the general public. And if I were to walk away from this with anything, if you're in an enterprise and you're going to use generative AI, and I'm looking at it, Matt, just a little bit different, I agree with Grant on the business as well, but there's an and. I think on the code and other aspects of running a business that are sometimes not seen by the customer are where these advances can come. If I can make my code a lot more robust and faster and scalable, I've got a little bit of an edge that's going to help me. So I think that there's some of that. It's a grandiose statement to get a reaction out of Matt that works. So that's good. He's right. Not only is he right, he's right about this. I'll leave you with this. If you're playing with these tools, and this is my colleague that's doing it, 100,000 lines of code a day, it all depends on your engineers working smarter. Not smarter because they're working with these tools. Output of these tools has to be validated by engineers. If you're working with engineers that cannot validate the output, you're in can't use that word, you're in a lot of trouble. Okay, I am excited that this is going to hopefully drive an industry to more engaged engineers using the smarts they've got, mathematicians using the smarts they've got, because that's what's going to be required to validate the outputs of these things are accurate and not going to do harm. And I take a look at the architecture we had earlier, there should have been a light bulb with Einstein on it. Somebody's got to review that
that knows more about it than they typically know today, which means, are we talking to our engineering teams, our architects? Are we telling them, you need to spin up, not just in using the tool, but in how are you going to validate the tool's doing the thing we need it to do? I don't know. Any thought on that, Matt?
So currently, what they're doing is we have funds, upgraded technologists who are getting paid pennies on the dollar who know machine learning and who sit there and make money by validating the code that gets generated by certain prompts across the globe. So you think that it's magically happening, and it's really people in third world countries who have PhDs who can't get jobs like we have here, who are making money online, pennies on the dollar doing this. So there's all kinds of organizations who are doing that now, but that's where those current validations come from. It's a human actually doing that. It is not the system. The system is ferreting around that data, but there's actually things going, no, this doesn't work, and you're supposed to fix it, and then you get paid.
Okay, and that's probably retraining the models in addition.
That's exactly right.
And that makes it even better. So it's an ecosystem, but I do agree. I think it's I did a bio search engine years ago where 3 patent attorneys, I presented data to them and they made the decisions about this venture capitalist is going to talk to this scientist. And it was great. The government, it was a government funded thing. The government never succeeded in it. But when people in the loop, it was like 90% accurate. So you're right. So that kind of gets me, and I know I went over, sorry. There's no more questions on the Menti, but I did want to share this. These are the references of everything that's in here, and I'll share that, the deck we shared out as well. And it's all part of the ISA, CAF, C2D consortium of architects in the industry that just are my peers and mentors, and they just are going to change the world like you are. You should be participating in this. If any of you wants to write an article, Matt, I will sponsor it on this as a C2D sponsored article in the Architecture and Governance magazine. Anything that you think is worth sharing to the world, kind of a thing. And what I'm really excited about, the generative AI is so cool, right? I think quantum is going to be way cooler, and I am so excited about that. Because my degrees in physics and my dissertation was on quantums. So it's like, ooh, I can't wait for that one. And programming will be different, right? It's not binary. So with that, do you guys want to guide us to the gallows?
Yeah.
Well done, Jeff.